Hola y bienvenidos una vez más. Mi nombre es Angélica Bernabé, soy la directora del Centro especializado en Tartamudez aquí en Perú. Y hoy día estoy con Jane Harley. Ella es terapeuta, parte del equipo de docentes del Michael Palin Centre for Stammering. Y bueno, tiene una amplia trayectoria y experiencia en lo que es la terapia de aceptación y compromiso, o ACT, como se dice en inglés. Y hoy día vamos a hablar un poquito sobre eso, vamos a comentarles un poco sobre este enfoque aplicado al tratamiento de la tartamudez, que sé que va a ser bastante productivo para todos. Jane ha sido mi profesora en este tema y es una capa, así que tengo el honor de que esté aquí con nosotros y que podamos compartir un poco más con ustedes sobre este tema. So, thank you, Jane. I'm really happy that you are here and we can talk a bit about this approach for South American people.
Oh, well, thank you for the invitation.
So, well, today, as I said already in Spanish, we will talk about acceptance and commitment therapy. And, well, acceptance and commitment therapy, as their name say by itself, looks focusing the importance of accept ourselves and also those things that are out of control and have commitment to take action in our lives to achieve our goals no matter what our difficulties are. The idea of start to introduce this approach on stammering treatment can give us a lot of tools. So what's your take on this?
Completely agree. I think it does give us a lot of tools, and as well as that, and it's an approach which has a real, I think for me, a real integrity. It really says something real about how life is, which is that life comes with its challenges and its difficulties, and that what we all do as human beings is start to struggle against those sometimes, and that often tends to make things worse rather than better. And so one of the this key idea of ACT, which is it's about fundamentally for all of us being able to just live life better, more fully, more being the people that we really want to be in our heart of hearts. And so that starting point of saying actually it's our reactions to things, our struggle against things, which causes the problems, that has a real sense of trueness to me, and it feels as though it's really useful in stammering as in all areas of life, when we're able to actually just stop and sort of lean into the things that are difficult and be more open to those difficulties and have a kind of a different relationship with the things that are challenging or even unwanted. And so that enables us to start exploring a whole lot of other skills which are relevant for stammering and relevant for life in general. I keep on saying that. I think this is really, really about life skills. And I come from a standard CBT background and spent many years in my training in Beckian CBT to explore thoughts and challenge thoughts and look at different perspectives on things. And there's value in that, and I would still use those techniques sometimes, but in ACT we have these really lovely ideas which are about we can also just choose to step back and unhook from thoughts that are unwanted or feelings that are difficult. And when we can step back, we can have a whole lot of other choices about how we respond to things rather than reacting and struggling. So there's lots of really practical skills in ACT, which I think are universally useful for human beings generally, I would say. And this idea of stepping back from things rather than being caught up in thoughts and feelings. And this really important idea of, thoughts aren't the enemy, feelings aren't the enemy. We don't have to try and get rid of the things we're thinking about. We don't have to replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts. What we can do is just learn how to step back and have a more flexible way of responding to things. And that opens up all sorts of stuff. And there's a whole bunch of skills that we play around with in ACT. And it's a very creative kind of therapy, and that's another thing I like about it.
Yeah. What I particularly like is, as you mentioned, this idea of we don't have to change our thoughts. We don't have to try to control them and or eliminate it, because thoughts are thoughts, feelings are feelings, and they are going to be there. And yeah, what I really like about ACT is this idea of, okay, just let's watch and listen what is in your mind, instead of try to, I don't know, fight against or blame yourself because you believe that you're having the wrong thoughts or things like that. And yeah.
So it's very normalizing, and that's another thing I really like about it. So it takes the idea of there's something wrong with me, takes that out of the picture. It just says, you know what, this is normal. This is how we are as human beings. The other thing I really love about ACT, and I think this is where ACT has made a real contribution, and I'm seeing this coming through in other psychological approaches, is this emphasis on values. And I don't mean values in a slightly corporate sort of a way, but really, what is it that, you know, makes life joyous for you? What is it that makes life really rich and full, and how to live more in line with that? Because we tend to make life smaller when we get caught up in anxieties and fears. And I think there's this lovely matching of what we might be doing in therapy and, you know, what's this all about? This is about living better, living fuller, living more richly. So there's ways that it can really make sense of the hard work that we might be doing in therapy. This is what it's all about at the end of the day. And I really like that.
Yeah, me too. And another thing I just remember is also this idea and this focus that well, we can read it in many places, of called at the third wave. Is well known that for some people the first wave is a behavioral thing, the second wave the cognitive and behavioral, and some people call it ACT as a third wave. What's your take on this?
I think people have different views on how to describe it, and so third wave isn't universally seen as a sort of, not everybody likes that description. I think amongst some areas of CBT, there's a concern that it makes standard CBT second wave and therefore older and maybe old-fashioned therefore, and I don't know that that's what's intended. So I think people have different ways of describing it. Third wave is quite common. I don't know whether that's necessary to use that description. ACT definitely fits under this umbrella of CBT, of cognitive behavior therapies, but it is different from Beckian CBT, and I think that difference is useful to be clear on.
Yeah. What I was reading also is and I mean I'm also agree with that point of view of call it third wave in some way, give us the idea of this one is better than the other one.
Yes.
And well, there are some approaches that could be better for some people while others are better for others.
It's all about trying to help people live better.
Yeah, and another interesting thing about ACT is the importance of don't call it ACT, because for example, when I started to read about ACT, well, you know, I started just reading, and to me in my head was ACT. And then I read another book where it says it's not ACT, it's ACT. Yes, and also in your course it was like, okay, I need to do this switch to ACT.
Well, you're not alone with that. A lot of people, I mean, unless you hear someone talk about it, it's very hard to know. And so, you know, you're certainly not alone in needing to make that switch. And one of the reasons that it's so nice to make that switch is that when we use the call it ACT, we're actually also capturing something really fundamentally important about the approach, which is about accepting the things that we struggle with, but also committing to do something. So it is about acting. It is about taking real conscious steps forward in the direction that we want to go in. So calling it ACT works on lots of levels.
Yeah, take action. And so
Yes.
but yes, I remember at the beginning I was like, ACT, no wait, ACT. Because it was like, when you read it, you don't have a voice that says that. So my mind was ACT, but well.
And isn't it interesting how hard it can be to make those switches once we've got a sort of in our heads that it's one way to say things.
Yeah.
So well done on making the switch.
And could you share us a bit about your experience using ACT in people who stammer? Because as we were talking at the beginning of this video, it can give a lot of tool, because at the end, stuttering is a lot about accept ourselves, about accept our way to talk, and try to achieve our goals no matter if we stutter or not. So I remember from the first time I read the name of this approach, I was like, okay, this is important for stammering, because stammering is acceptance. And so yeah, can you share us a bit about your experience using ACT on treatment?
Gosh, well, that's quite a big question, but let me give it a go. Well, first of all, I should say that I work with different clients of different ages, from families with quite young children through to my oldest client was someone who was in her 70s, although that was a few years ago. And I suppose I use ACT in different ways with different age groups, obviously. There is something that I have found, and I remember when I first started training in ACT, and someone said to me, you'll find that you start using it just a little bit, and then you start using it a little bit more, and then before you know it, you're using quite a lot of ACT in your practice, and that's been my experience. And so I think that's a very natural way to start developing an interest in ACT, is to start to try some things out. I would say that I very much integrate it with other ways of doing therapy, and so I don't suppose I very often do purely an ACT program, as it were, although there's not really such thing as an ACT program. It's more that there's ideas that help you conceptualize your work with your client and help you kind of move in different directions. So with one of the other really useful things about ACT is that there's this big emphasis on using metaphors and using active activities. The point of that is to get out of the domain of language, given that it's language that often ties us up in knots. And so there's a lot of use of metaphors and stories and practical activities. And what's quite nice about that is that really transfers across age ranges really well. And so some activities that I have come across for work with adults, I will also use with children, and vice versa, because there's this universal language of metaphor which makes things accessible across all ages. So different ways, I suppose, two of the main ways that I use it are to teach mindfulness skills, and I do that. Where that's something that feels useful, where that's something that clients are wanting. And to support that, I've done some other training in teaching mindfulness with teenagers. And also that idea of diffusion, and that's the stepping back from thinking, and that's one of the areas that I would say comes in a lot to my work. And so diffusion, teaching mindfulness, but also really finding ways to talk about struggle and how struggle is just not so helpful, and struggle makes things harder. There's this lovely metaphor, and if we've got time I could just talk you through it now. Maybe your viewers will enjoy seeing this. And it's the metaphor of, well, imagining that you're at the beach and you're holding a beach ball, and you might remember we did this on the course that you had, remember. And so for any of your viewers who are watching this, you might want to just try this. And so you're just imagining you're at the beach or at a swimming pool and you're holding this big beach ball in your hands. And what you try and do is hold it under the water. And even if you're trying to do that just now as you're watching this video, as you're holding it under the water, really feeling in your arms just what that's like, and maybe feeling that your muscles are having to work quite hard because this beach ball naturally wants to bob up. And just really tune into how hard you're working to keep this under the water. And then imagine that you're just letting the beach ball bob on the surface of the water, and just tune into how that feels in your muscles, in your arms and in your body, and what the difference is. And you might notice, any of you who are trying this, you might notice that when you're holding it under the water, it feels harder. And that's a really lovely metaphor or analogy that I use with all ages now, actually, to talk about how much harder it is when we try and keep stammering under the water, keeping it hidden, keeping it out of sight, and how much easier it can feel when things are out in the open. So that's, I love the way that in ACT we use metaphors, and I find that transferable across all age groups.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite. That one, and the other one, what is with the hands, and
Yes.
like that your thoughts are here and you can see, but if you move it a little bit, you still can see your wolf, but you have your thoughts here. You don't have to eliminate it or move it. Yeah, I also really like that. And another thing that you just mentioned, but I know that a lot of people will have this thing in mind, is about how we also can use ACT on children. It's not purely for adults.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is, you know, we need to adapt things when we're thinking about children. We need to think about what they're interested in and how to make things more concrete. But we can really adapt these skills to working with younger children, using mindfulness with younger children, talking about stepping back from thoughts with younger children. There's such a lot of creativity in the ACT community. There's a lot of sharing of ideas too in the ACT community, and so if anyone is interested in looking at, you can have a look at the website for the Association for Behavioural and Contextual Sciences, and you can find a lot of things that are shared there. Yeah,
there are a lot of things. And also activities like the bus, and yeah, there are a lot of things that can be useful also for children.
And I think that one of the main things with ACT always is just to tune into what is of interest to your client, whatever age they are. And so if, you know, for a 9-year-old, then what are they going to be interested? What's the stuff that really makes them happy and feel fulfilled? It's probably just having fun with their friends. And so we can think about, you know, values, if you like, in a very child-friendly way. If it's just about having fun, it's about connecting with your friends. It doesn't have to be sort of super serious adult language. And in terms of their interests, you know, what metaphors will make sense when we're talking about stepping back from thoughts? So maybe it's watching your football team playing. If we've got, look, most kids over here in the UK follow a football team, and so we can make it really relevant to children just by knowing who they are, understanding what sets them alight in their heart of hearts, and understanding what their interests are. And we can create metaphors out of whatever people are interested in.
Yeah. And that's why I really like ACT, and also that's why I wanted to share a bit about it, especially because in South America it's quite complicated to find this information in Spanish. So I think that will make it easier for a lot of people.
Okay, because there is a lot online, but yes, I appreciate it's probably mostly in English. But there are some really fantastic websites that are resources. Russ Harris's actmindfully.com is a fantastic website to go to for training, for resources, for stuff to read. So there's a lot that's shared. But yes, probably the most of it is in English.
Yeah, exactly. But well, thank you so much, Jen. It was very nice to have this conversation with you. It's always nice talking with you and learning from you. So thank you.
Well, it was lovely to be invited, and it's lovely to see you again. So thank you. I'm glad.
Y muchas gracias a ustedes por haber visto este video. Espero que les haya gustado y que hayan podido conocer un poquito más sobre este enfoque tan importante y tan útil en el tratamiento de la tartamudez. Espero que les haya gustado y también los invito a suscribirse porque cada mes vamos a lanzar un video con un experto internacional invitado hablando sobre algún tema en específico sobre la tartamudez. Así que muchas gracias nuevamente y ya nos estaremos viendo pronto.